So you saw the thumbnail, presumably read the title, and I'm just gonna jump right into it. Mutahar is a liar, a fraud, and even a scammer. And on the off chance you have absolutely no idea who Mutahar is because you've been buried underneath a rock for the entirety of your existence, Mutahar is a YouTuber with almost 4 million subscribers that spends a lot of his time talking about things like scams and also moral posting on the internet about how bad people exist and that you should be horrified or something. The scamming videos we're going to get into in a little bit, but more importantly than that, the moral posting is a little weird, especially when he's talking about predators. And the reason that's really fucking weird is because Mutahar is a fucking Muslim. One of the core tenets of being Muslim is you have to venerate Muhammad. Muhammad is the prophet that, how do I put this? Married a 6-year-old and then waited until she was around 9 or 10 years old to fuck her, aka consummating the marriage. In other words, the prophet Muhammad, that looks like this by the way, married a 6-year-old and then 3 years later, had sex with that 6-year-old before that 6-year-old could even get out of puberty. He is Muslim and is venerating that, while simultaneously on YouTube, whining incessantly about predators when he venerates, quite literally, a predator. And before, a lot of you people cope and you try to say some cringe BS like, oh well, child marriages were very common in the medieval period. In the West, the only portion of the entire planet that fucking matters, they at least had the courtesy to wait until those girls finished out puberty. No, Muhammad's just like, I like him young. But it isn't just the fact that he venerates some dude that fucked a 9-year-old. It's that the entire point of venerating a prophet in a religion is to treat them like your moral guide. They are the moral compass that you build your entire life around. To put it simply for the autists among you, how am I supposed to believe that Mutahar is truly at all concerned about online predators whenever the center point for his morality, the moral compass he builds his entire life around, is quite literally a 6th century predator that he venerates as his prophet? How am I supposed to take him in any way seriously whenever he's supposed to love said prophet pedophile more so than his own father, according to the Quran? And on top of that, by the way, in case any of you are questioning whether or not he's Muslim,
pin enemies in place with suppressive fire.
Now, for some of you people who may have picked up, you heard the Allahu Akbar by the actual enemy team. And as somebody that comes from this culture, you know, Indian Muslim, I would just like to say that God is great. Like, that's literally the translation.
And the reason I bring up all of that shit and went really hard on the paint with the Islam bit and all that stuff is because it ties directly into a stream, actually 2 streams, that he had with Chud Logic, where Mutahar just fucking lied to Chud's face.
That was you sweeping for Nux Taku. It's so obvious, dude.
So what's the backstory with the Chud Logic thing? Well, to put it very simply, there was drama going on with Shadman. People revealed every communication this Shadman had with other people. Shadman was somebody that drew lolicon images of other people. More infamously, he drew a lolicon image of Keemstar's daughter. As a result of this, a lot of people went after him and went after basically everybody that he was connected to. One of the people that he was connected to, at least briefly from what it appears, was a guy named Nux Taku.
Y'all, back from vacation. Oh, it's been a relaxing journey, sort of, kind of, not so much really, to be honest.
Nux was a co-host on Mutahar's Some Ordinary podcast, and it looked really bad that he had apparently some amount of association with Shadman. But it got even worse when people found out Mr. Nux here was wanting to collab with Shadman. This created some minor controversy, and he tried to say, oh, well, you know, actually, I was just pulling the wool over your eyes. I was just trying to meme on Shadman. Which is easy to say after all of this is out in the open. And so in the wake of all of this, Mutahar found himself on Chud Logic's stream.
I'm hearing and seeing a lot of rumors and criticism of Nux Taku for his connection to Shadman that many are saying he's trying to disassociate himself from now because it's controversial. Do you have any perspectives or takes on that?
I haven't followed anything on it. I did have a call with him, and he did tell me, like, they interacted before. I think it was, like, the collab shit. Okay. And from just, like, behind the scenes, he told me that this was all, like, a fucking joke or something at the time, which is, like, I never pressed so hard into that. just because I have no knowledge of like how far his relationship goes. All I know about Shadman is like the last 6 days. There's been a fucking mega leak of everyone's interactions, like Elvis the Alien, Nux, everyone. So it's like, I don't know the extent of it, but obviously it's a disavowal if he ever obviously wanted to collaborate with him in a meaningful way or like defend him or something, you know?
Yeah, sure. And,
Um,
obviously, I
and
don't want to like super hardcore hold you to account
yeah,
for someone else's actions.
and I also just want to say I don't ever would believe that Nux would have no idea about the Shadman child lolly drawing stuff. Like that would make no fucking sense. He's been in this space long enough to know better. So if
Sure.
this was
Okay.
like a genuine interaction, like I have no doubt as somebody that is in the anime culture to not fucking have any clue that Shadman was doing crazy shit. Like you'd have no, if I knew that Shadman was drawing fucking kids and doing crazy shit, Nux definitely did, and that's never okay.
And so, as you heard, Mutahar, in a nutshell, is saying things like it was not okay. Nux obviously knew this information, but he does give an out that will come out later, he says, in a meaningful way. But then immediately after all of that comes the infamous definitive statement that never happened.
Okay. Are you going to keep on with the podcast?
No, we would cancel the podcast. It's not happening. The podcast
Dude,
is done.
this is hard because obviously, people want me to
Podcast
fucking...
is done. Yeah, podcast is done now.
Wait, what?
Yeah, the podcast is over. We are not filming the last episode. It's over.
Is that are you serious?
Yeah, we're not doing the podcast anymore. It's done.
Why?
We're supposed to film on Tuesday. Well, there's a couple reasons for it. A lot of that was obviously some of the Shad stuff too, because we were kind of sitting there. We're like, me and Caleb, we were just like, this is, I don't know, it's weird. The other thing was we just want to redo things, maybe like 2 months down the road or something, between each other, and that's kind of where we're at.
The first reason that came out of his mouth was the Shadman drama. But the second reason he poses is that him and Oompaville are going to move on and do their own little podcast thing by themselves. It's pretty simple, pretty cut and dry, a very, very definitive statement.
Damn. Like Starku getting iced out. Sorry.
I mean, for me, for like Nux or whatever, like I talked to him and he's a good friend behind the scenes for sure. And this whole situation, like I would have to really look into more of his involvement and like everything. Like if you want to walk me through it, like that would be, I'd be completely fine. I just have not had the chance to like really look through every single message.
Yeah,
he told me that he interacted briefly.
I followed the Elvis the Alien stuff. I've looked a little bit at the Nux stuff, so you'll have to bear with me. This is my vague understanding of it, okay? So, please take it with a pinch of salt. But my basic understanding of it is that Nux Taku presented the situation in the circumstance that he'd had very kind of, somewhat limited interactions. And then people were starting to point out, well, there's this interaction and there's this interaction and there's this interaction. One specific example is there was a screenshot showed of Nux Taku trying to have some sort of collaboration with Shadman that he didn't reference in his initial response to it. And I think that what people were saying was, well, hang on a minute, you were trying to collaborate with him, but you're trying to act like there wasn't this more meaningful connection. And his response was something like, well, yes, I would collaborate with him. I'd collaborate with EDP. And the reason I wanted to do that was because I wanted to take him to task or criticize him for what he'd done. And he sort of gestured to other kinds of coverage where he'd done that. And then I think the counter argument to that was, well, hang on a second. You were bringing people on not to give them like a hardball interview. It was more so to kind of jokingly mock them for things that they'd done rather than really take them to task for the bad things that they'd done. That's my understanding of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, he would obviously have known about the Shadman lore, so there is no, at least, belief for me that he did not know about the child drawing stuff. So the collab stuff is a bad look. I did not see that tweet entirely, but it lines up with what he was saying. Like people had pointed out that he was like collaborating or some shit, or like calling out for it, but it was like a joke thing. I don't know. Honest to God, I have no idea like how close of a friendship was, but like I said, if he's in that fucking group of like content creation, like the anime side of things, then he would have known Shadman, and that would never have been okay. I feel like if he had any interaction, he should have just come clean entirely. It does come across a little weird that he made a whole response, but he admitted that part. It's like, I think if you're in that camp, if you ever interacted with Shadman, just completely own up to it once, take the fucking L and move on. But that's just weird if you're not able to I don't know. It almost seems like kind of like hiding an interaction for no real reason.
And in that moment, there are two main takeaways from this. Number one, he actually does refer to Nux as a friend in that clip you just saw. That'll also be important later. And number two, he gives himself another out. I haven't looked into it all the way yet. I still need to look into it. Now, bear in mind, he has already announced that the podcast is over, that they're not releasing the final episode, and that they are moving on without Nux. Like, these are the two statements he said at the start, and now, for some reason, he's saying he hasn't even looked into it. So meaning he already made this decision without first having looked into it, which is an interesting take. And at the start of this, too, he even states, you know, the entire Shadman collab was just a joke. Even going as far as to say that Nux should come clean, and he reiterates that here.
Going after every single person that ever replied to a tweet is excessive to me. But if there was more substance to the interaction and you want to speak on it, I think you've just got to honestly present it, warts and all, and then account for it, say what you think about it, and move forward. I think that even if you're mistaken or you're forgetting something, if you present it without the full facts, it looks like you're trying to hide from something, which comes across as dishonesty or lying, which makes you look worse, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's no reason to really hide it unless, like, the interaction was more deeper than it was initially let on, is what I would say.
And so 2 days later, on the 30th of July, Mutahar says this in a Nux Taku video.
Muta here, and I just wanted to make it as clear as possible. This podcast is not over because of Nux and his situation currently. Ladies and gentlemen, a couple days ago at this point, I was on a podcast, or not a podcast, but I was on a live stream with a creator known as Chud, and I wasn't exactly clear as to the ending of the podcast, which really is an ending.
That's really odd. That's almost like the exact opposite of everything we just heard. But that's okay, because the day after that, on the 31st of July, guess what drops on the Some Ordinary Podcast channel? You guessed it, the final episode, where, by the way, they totally look like they're really selling this idea it had nothing to do with ducks. I mean, look at how awkward all these people are when explaining this. It's really fucking weird.
Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and welcome back to the final episode of the Some Ordinary Podcast. I've got me, your host, I've got Oompaville, I've got Nux Taku, and our special guest and friend and a producer of the show, the Gamer from Mars. And this week, we've got a lot to talk about because, my God, there's been misunderstandings, one of the largest YouTube empires possibly on the verge of collapse, the fall of the Roman Empire, so to speak, and God knows what else in the fucking internet sphere, dude.
Yeah, holy shit, what a ride.
So, first thing I want to address is, obviously, Nux. Nux, you've had a internet relationship with a internet bad guy known as Shadman that I guess we've all jumped into the vortex of. I just want to stress this podcast was never really ending because of that. It's a bit of a restructure. I did end up going out filming with Caleb, actually, in Stephenville, Texas, and there was a lot of I guess content plans that kind of came out of it. I really do like the IRL stream or IRL podcast kind of format, so it's a bit more restructuring there. It has nothing to do with, obviously, our relation to Nux. Nux is a PNG character that has always been a PNG popular character on the internet. Controversial, but not controversial enough for us to cut our friendships with him. At least in my opinion.
That's very kind of you.
Good job of really tying up those loose ends, Muta.
Damn.
What the f*** do you want me to say, bro?
I do have to say, I do have to say, it all is damn suspicious. I don't blame anyone.
Oh,
for
yeah,
this.
it is funny,
The
yeah.
timing was insane.
It's a terrible coincidence.
And so, yeah, that was a very odd, very strange podcast, to say the least. What ends up happening is Harmful Opinions drops a video on Nux on the 8th of August, and whew, it's very damning.
I knew about the lolly stuff and some of his art, like the bestiality with fictional children, etc. Definitely enough to grill the guy. Holy shit, there is so much more. Like, there is so much more than just that. That is the worst, and that would have been the hard cutoff for me to not even respond to the guy, probably. But I legitimately was gonna grill the guy. If you've seen my collabs, I didn't know about Keemstar's daughter, although that's the less important part of my tweet. Collabs are not promotions or condonement in any way on my channel.
He would have bullied him, crushed his soul over lowly bestiality. This is where I start to feel a niggling doubt. For instance, I mean, he did specify clearly child bestiality is what he has an issue with, so it's not the same, but goddamn, I do love making a spectacle of strange things, but this is just bait for who knows what kind of person to click it and then watch him react to a speedrun fail compilation. What kind of fish are you gonna catch with a worm like that on your hook? This kind. The kind that's into that stuff and will share the source for your viewers in the comments. Wait a second. That profile pic. Who's that little cartoon girl? I swear I've seen her before. Oh, how adorable. What a sweet child. I've also seen her in a thumbnail of a video on Nuxtaku's Nuxanor channel. A rather unwise reverse image search on Google eventually leads you to a hentai site page where the image, which features an erect penis that had just been cut off for the thumbnail, is tagged with, among other labels, imminent rape. Loli. By the way, that little shark girl, she's an avatar for a VTuber and she's called Gura. Here's a little clip where Nuxtaku mentions her.
There's lollies, which I have absolutely nothing against. I don't think anyone has anything against lollies, okay? Like Chibidoki or Megumin from Konosuba or Gura. Nothing has anything against lollies. It's lolly that's the gray zone.
He's very clear though. It's gray. It's not full pedo. His thumbnails aren't full pedo. It's sus, but they're just cartoons. So I'm still not really buying the idea he'd have been super hostile to Shadman in a collab. Be real, it would have been light ribbing, that any weirdo cartoon cunny connoisseur has heard a million times. One more little thing I want to peep before getting back on track a bit, presumably with this being his take on loli, his take on cartoons, we could definitely expect him to be much more serious about questionable things involving real children, right? Wait, that's not funny. That's the other thing. Extremely concerning. For clarity, the words I heard him say were, "So now you got all these underage kids on TikTok doing the things. Obviously solo, but the implication is there." And then straight into commenting on how catchy the song is. Teehee.
The fact is there's really no reason to believe Nux when he says the collab was just memes, bro. And now at this point, 24 hours later, on the 9th of August, is the second interaction relating to this subject that Chud and Mutahar have.
What was the reason for this confusion, which made me look kind of retarded over the podcast?
Why the podcast was shutting down?
Yeah.
So I remember the time we were talking, you brought up the Nux Shadman stuff, which was a thing we looked at, just because you know that list came out on YouTube Drama about all the people connected to Shadman.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked to Nux briefly about it too. We asked what was the connection, and he just told me that it was like him fucking interviewing fucking Shadman or asking for an interview, like one of these ironic things that he told me. Which even at the time we were still looking in, and I got in touch with like a former editor way after we talked, and it did apparently seem like it was just him trying to reach out to meme or whatever, kind of like, you know, the Oompaville interview or whatever he explained to me when it came to Andrew Tate. The reason why I couldn't really discuss his podcast stuff with you so candidly is at the time, if you hadn't noticed, I don't know how much you watched the podcast, but one of the co-hosts, Oompaville, wasn't really showing up to the show. And it was at the time, a week before we were out in Texas filming, we had basically severed our ties, me and Oompaville, with our management company, who also owned the podcast. So when we severed our ties, right, it was unfortunately at the same time as the Shadman stuff. So all of the stuff we were looking into, but the primary reason why we had severed it is because the management team that we were working with, Nano Zebra at the time, also owned the production rights to our podcast, which meant that as we severed our ties, me and Oompaville, we didn't really find it feasible to continue the podcast tie. So that's why it's winded down for a month or two. And plus, me and Oompaville also really decided that it was better to have a set
in Texas and just start filming.
That's
there.
fine, but you said it was nothing to do with Nux Taku, which was totally different to what you said to me.
I want to point out the fact that it's really obnoxious that I had to sit there and listen to Mutahar yap for what seemed like forever about a bunch of shit that he should have said on the 28th of July. And then on top of that, give excuses for why it is that he didn't.
Yes, when like the Shadman stuff came out, from like just a fucking relationship level, obviously we wanted to see if, you know, one of our friends was like defending a lolicon drawer or something. Now, going at his word, obviously he was going for an interview, and the interview I believe never happened. So there's no way to go off on if he's like a Shadman defender.
Okay, this is all rambling that you're doing to distract from the issue, Mutar. Let's cut to the fucking chase here, okay? You said point A on my stream, okay, which gave one impression, and then you said point B. Point A being the podcast is ending, and it was very strongly implied it was because of Nux Taku, and then there's this investigation you apparently need to do, and then later
no,
like...
there was a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and it was a stream. We got into it. I couldn't discuss this one business aspect at the time because we were severing ties. We had our contracts with the company. This was not something that I could get into.
All happening fluid. Okay, that is bullshit. Actually, everything he just said was bullshit. So I find it very interesting he's saying here, well, it wasn't that serious, and we have no way of knowing exactly how serious this collab was supposed to be, and that was his reasons for it having nothing to do with Nux Taku, which is strange, because even in the first conversation he had with Chud, he exclaimed that it was all memes, and yet, even then, was saying he was going to completely destroy the podcast.
I did have a call with him, and he did tell me, like, they interacted before. I think it was, like, the collab shit.
Okay.
And from just, like, behind the scenes, he told me that this was all, like, a fucking joke or something at the time.
Yeah, the podcast is over. We are not filming the last episode. It's over.
Even Mutahar's partner confirmed everything Muta was saying in that first stream Chud had done with Mutahar.
Your partner came into my chat and said the reason the last episode wasn't released was because of the Shadman stuff. Is that true?
Wait, what did Jem say? It was because it wasn't because
Jem came
of the
into
Shadman
chat
stuff?
and gave a super chat and said that the reality of it was the last episode was not being released because of the Shadman stuff, but the restructuring was going to happen. How does that play into this?
I have to fucking confront her on why she said that, actually.
I don't know. It's a very odd thing to lie about all of a sudden. And also, I know I'm probably going to say this several times throughout the video, but you didn't have to say in detail any of the business stuff if it was true that any of that had anything to do with it. All you had to say was, it's business shit I can't talk about. That's it.
Okay. But you understand if things are happening fluid and conclusive statements are getting made, that's obviously going to cause...
Yeah, but I'm not the one making the conclusive statements. And even on your stream, I had mentioned that there was a million other things behind the reasons.
Okay,
yes, the
bro, that
Shadman
is
stuff
total
was one of
coke
the
to
things
there's
we
all these
looked
other...
into.
Yes, you mentioned it, but the focus was on about Nux Taku having this connection with Shadman that coloured the whole thing. And that was the focus of what you were saying to me. Was it not?
Okay, but that was brought up on a stream. I even mentioned that there were other things aside from that, too.
I didn't make conclusive statements. I'm not the one making conclusive statements, but I'm pretty sure everybody unanimously would agree that the following clip that I actually just showed you earlier is, in fact, a fucking conclusive statement.
The podcast is done now.
Wait, what?
Yeah, the podcast is over. We are not filming the last episode. It's over.
Is that are you serious?
Yeah, we're not doing the podcast anymore. It's done.
Why?
We're supposed to film on Tuesday. Well, there's a couple reasons for it. A lot of that was obviously some of the Shad stuff too, because we were kind of sitting there, we're like, me and Caleb, we were just like, this is, I don't know, it's weird.
And then the second lie he tells is he says, I told you there were other reasons. Not really. You actually just gave another reason.
The other thing was we just want to redo things maybe like 2 months down the road or something. Between each other, and that's kind of where we're at.
And bear in mind, at no point in those statements did he say anything that even remotely resembled at all, there's all this background business dealings that I can't talk about. He never said anything even remotely like that. In fact, the two things he did say were directly in contrast to anything that would even remotely resemble what he's claiming now. And so because of this, Chud just straight up calls him out on what really seems to be absolutely the case. Mutahar is covering Nux's ass.
Okay, but on Twitter, that was you sweeping for Nux Taku. It's so obvious, dude. It's so obvious that it changed. The energy changed of what you were saying.
I wasn't sweeping for him. I looked into the situation. At the time, it showed up on YouTube Drama. Again, this is all stuff that was happening super duper fluidly. I had no idea the extent of the thing. I asked him pretty much, hey, what was this interview about? It was supposed to be a joke and a meme. Even one of his former editors came up to me and basically said, yeah, this was just supposed to be like a meme edit. And that's pretty much where I let it at because I had no idea what to go on forward for it.
He already said this at the time and then said, despite that, he was ending the podcast. He is actually just being a slimy fuck right now. You can't say in one video, I know all of that fucking collab stuff between Nux and Shadman was supposed to be a meme, but I'm gonna end the podcast. And then in the next video say, I am not ending the podcast because the Nux collaboration was just a meme. That is slimy and fucking dumb. You're a piece of shit, Mutahar. You're a lying sack of shit.
Muta, let's cut the bullshit and let me read your words to you. Okay? I'm paraphrasing this. I'm quoting you, but this is from a larger statement. I can send you the transcript that someone's kindly said to me. It's not happening. The podcast is done. I say, dude, this is hard because obviously you know people want, and you say the podcast is done. Yeah, the podcast is done now. I say, wait, what? You say, yeah, the podcast is over. We're not filming. We are not filming the last episode now. I ask you if you're serious. You say, yeah, we're not doing the podcast anymore. I say, why? You say, we're supposed to film on Tuesday. Well, there's a couple of reasons for it. A lot of that was obviously the Shad stuff too.
Yeah, a lot of it is the Shad stuff as well, because at the time the YouTube drama list came out, and that was just one of the things we were looking at with Nux Taku.
That is a more conclusive statement than you're giving it credit for. And now you're trying to claim that afterwards you made another statement to clarify when you gave a conclusive statement on my show.
I followed it up on Twitter literally like the day after the fucking clips was going out by that one Samuel account.
And it was like 180 to what you'd said on my stream. And so obviously people thought...
Dude, because on your stream, you brought up the Nux Taku stuff, and it kind of hits me. Like, I can't obviously cover the other, like, business-related side of it. And yes, for that, I do really apologize, because I understand how I made you look fucking terrible in that situation. I'm just asking to look at it from my perspective as somebody that's thrown into the fucking den right there while I'm dealing with a bunch of stuff behind the scenes.
And so at this point, with all of the lies he'd been spewing, why the fuck should I then take him at his word that there was any behind-the-scenes shit worth any consideration by anyone? And so after this, Nicholas Diorio tries to, like, give an out. It was like the strangest out I've ever seen in my life, where Nicholas is like, oh, so were you just saying that to placate the chat or something? I don't know, that was really weird, like as if that would be a good thing. That would actually be a bad thing, because you're basically asking him, were you manipulating the people watching? It's just weird, but here, listen to yourself.
So when you said it just abruptly, is it possible you were just like, you saw the chat and the chat was saying stuff, and then you just said something?
The
and
Shadman stuff, obviously it's going to have something to do, because at the time you're going to be investigating every single person, right? Like, it's one of those things that popped up. I will say it wasn't.
But how can the Shadman have anything to do with it if Nux Taku is apparently going to be part of the podcast down the line? That's what you also claimed. The Nux Taku also claimed. That doesn't make any sense, does it?
Like, if we're looking into how close his relationship is, right? Like, if he's just doing an interview and it was supposed to be a Mimi interview, yeah, I'd probably say it was a dumb idea in general to do an interview. Just like I think the Oompaville Andrew Tate interview was pretty stupid. But down the road, I'll still work with you, considering you're not actually in a position of defending a Lolicon artist. Now, if it turned out that the situation was deeper and the people that I, had reached out to me, like a former editor, said, no, this interview was supposed to be a total glazing of fucking Shadman, then yeah, we would have cut Nux Taku out of the future podcast endeavor that we're planning to bring back.
So somehow Muta had the weird out that he could have taken, and he fucked up and went the opposite direction and decided to say something really profoundly fucking dumb. And what he did was he, again, did that whole, well, it wasn't that serious of a relationship between Nux and Shadman. But again, he said this before and said he was going to shut down the podcast knowing that. And the thing is, even if you don't want to call that lying, which I would, at the very minimum, it is slimy and dishonest.
When you're collaborating with somebody, it's like, obviously you're just sitting there making a video. We haven't done like a full background to look onto what his content is or anything. Obviously, I was on a few collaborations with him when he was doing like fucking memes and like the game shows with like 15 fucking creators. And that's pretty much the extent of my collaborations. Behind the scenes, he's only been like a kind person to me, and we've had just, mature conversations that are well outside the scope of YouTube or just discussing business. I've never really fucking. He's never really shown me lolicon in the background.
I just feel like you're taking it a bit easy on him because you're friends with him. That's all.
So at this point in the conversation, they're actually talking about the Harmful Opinions video that had just come out a day previously. And what's interesting about this is he says the word memes, and we're going to get into that a little bit later.
That gets me wild, man.
Ultimately, what I would say here that I do find interesting is that up to this point, him and Nux were friends. They were buddies, they were pals, they were friends. In fact, he even said good friend. And to take that a step further, at one point, he is called out for being biased, and then he's like, well, you know, I am a little bit, you know, somebody you're friendly with.
You pity Noxtaku. You know he's a wretched freak, just like I do, but he's your friend and you pity him, so you're giving him some good grace. I know exactly what's going on.
I don't think that's the case. I don't think.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There is a bit of bias for sure, obviously, because you're friendly with somebody. Yes.
In real time, Mutahar is actually distancing himself from Nux. Nux went from friend to good friend to kind person, and then somebody you're friendly with. Isn't that weird? And now he's saying their entire relationship on the podcast was fuck Nux.
How did you guys even start the podcast in particular? Like or how did you get that group, I guess?
We were just collaborating with those like game shows at the time, and you know, we talked about other shit behind the scenes. We were, you know, just like fucking gaming or whatever. So at that point we were like, all right, fine, we can do the podcast together. Now, mind you, our whole relationship with him on the podcast, every fucking episode was like fuck Nux, fuck Nux, fuck Nux. But it was just one of those things where it's like, I guess you're just a VTuber who will consider you annoying and cool.
He is really going hard on the distancing himself from Nux thing. It is really, really fucking silly. If you're not lying, Mutahar, then why is it that you're being so dishonest, actually defending Nux to some capacity, and then later distancing yourself from Nux when the questions get a little hard? And so now at this point in this interaction between Chud and Mutahar, we have gone through 2 of the 5 stages of grief and are now on the 3rd, bargaining.
What would be an amicable thing? Should we like sever a tie with him based on everything that you've seen so far?
I don't listen. What you do is your discretion. I'm not saying you need to do anything. That's not up to me. That's your decision to make. But
no, but I mean, like, what is the right decision? Should we just sever ties with him completely?
I mean, if it was me and it turned out my pal had a bunch of weird lolicon shit in his past and wasn't being honest about it, you know, I'd ask him to come clean and come forward and speak on it openly. And if he didn't at that point, yeah, I'd probably be like, yeah, this is fucking it.
Yeah. Well, I sent him the thumbnail. I sent him the whole, like, I sent him, like, basically a quick summarization of everything that we said. And I would actually prefer that he be on the show. I think here's where here's where my capitulation is, okay? I think for him to stay on a show and work with me directly, I'm not even talking about like just Caleb here, just with me. I think it would be better if he comes on your show, or not even your show. That's up to you. I don't want to fucking decide your schedule or anything. He should come and explain these things pretty candidly. And if he can't do that, then I don't think he should be able to work with us in the future. I think that's a pretty fair way to go about it. I haven't seen the harmful opinion videos.
I mean, I'd be more than happy to speak to Noxtaku, but in fairness, I mean, Harmful Opinions made the video. He's the one that's got the more substantive critiques exactly of that. I've just watched his video about it. I mean, obviously,
if he's not willing to answer the critiques, then I don't think he should be working with us. I think that's a fair way to go about it, right? If he's not able to explain these critiques and explain his position in a
I think that's perfectly reasonable. You know, Harmful Opinions made this video about it, and you know, I'd probably arrange for him to come on and say his piece too. He's happy to come on streams normally. And yeah, I just think if you're Noxtaku, I don't think is represented honestly, and if he can't do that, then yeah, that makes a position untenable, surely.
Yeah, if he can't explain his position, and if he can't explain some of this past behavior, then I don't think he should be working with us in the future. And maybe down the podcast road, we might not even bring him back or bring him onto it if he can't explain these positions. I think that's a fair way to go about it.
And yeah, admittedly, that clip is kind of fucking boring. However, I have to ask myself, why can't Mutahar address any of these allegations with Nux? Why does it require another person's stream? Why can't fucking Mutahar do any of that? But also note that Mutahar said that if Nux cannot answer for any of these allegations publicly, that he would disassociate from Nux. So the question is, did Nux ever address any of this publicly? No. And so the second question is, did Mutahar distance himself from Nux? Well, in all honesty, I have absolutely no idea, because conveniently, about a couple weeks after this stream with Chud ended, Mutahar took down his Twitter account, and then for some reason reactivated his Twitter account, made it private, and then mysteriously deleted all of his tweets. I'm sure that's totally not related or anything. But the last clip I want to play you here from that conversation with Chud actually ties into what I mentioned earlier with the memes thing.
Yeah, it seems to me like Nux is a completely unprincipled person, basically, on this shit, and basically willing to use the degenerate stuff when it's convenient, and then, you know, when it's called out, he's like, well, I never really did that, you know? I feel like that's... Yeah. And also, like, if those videos aren't age restricted, I feel like they definitely should be, because you probably shouldn't be showing, you know, porn like that on a website where, I know it's censored or whatever, but even censored stuff, like, you probably shouldn't be showing that consistently to a website full of minors in the context of, like, haha, funny joke, and then, you know, who knows what they get into as a result of that. That's basically my takeaway.
Wait, you showed
Yeah.
porn in those videos?
That is the lie that a lot of people are focusing on, and is, quite frankly, probably the biggest lie of this entire thing. Mutahar not only knows that Nux Taku shows porn on stream, on YouTube, and all that jazz. Not only does he know that, he knows full well that Nux Taku plays Lolicon in those videos, and on top of that, also knows that those are not age restricted. And the reason that Mutahar knows all of those things is because some old footage resurfaced of Mutahar being on a stream with Nux Taku and the Oompaville fella watching Lolicon. And funny enough, that stream, by the way, was not age restricted. And if that wasn't enough, Mutahar has wonderful, harvestable clips like the following.
This is the 5 rules of handling your younger sisters.
What the?
These are the 4 younger sisters.
Oh. Bro, they're fucking exceptionally young.
My go-to rule is when there's ever an anime character that looks like they're 10 freaking years old, they're probably 900-year-old cum vampires that have lied in wait for far too long.
These are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse we're looking at right now. This is like some mythological.
They've been around since long before civilization.
Exactly. I have to say, like, how does this get hit with community guidelines? Like, there's nothing.
Bro, nothing happened. It's wholesome. They're just hugging littles. I don't understand it either.
Yeah, this is, dude. YouTube, you're really fucking, you know, lowly unfriendly lately, dude.
Of course, by the way, every video that I mentioned here and clipped and all of that shit will be linked down below if you want to look into it yourself in both the description and the pinned comments. And so now that we got all of that out of the way, that Mutahar is lying and is protecting at minimum a Lolicon adjacent person, Mutahar doesn't actually care. And so to really hammer home how much Mutahar really doesn't care about anything he talks about, let's talk about scams.
That's not the only scam of the week. Did you see Pokemone's newest brand?
Oh, the cookies? Oh my god.
What?
White label stuff.
Okay, all right. This week's been insane. Caleb, you know about this one?
Yeah, the Mina cookies or whatever.
She released these cookies that are actually healthy and tasty and exactly the same as a Costco brand cookie.
Are they actually healthy though?
So you see, Mutahar is relatively famous for talking about scams. But it's weird whenever you're that kind of guy that talks about scams and then you have one.
There should be no fucking pass just because we're friends.
You mean you wouldn't help me scam?
I mean, no, I wouldn't. I mean, I think about it.
Fake friend, dude. You.
So what do I mean by that? Well, to start off with, what do you think of when you think gamer, right? I think PC Master Race, garbage tier console plebs that need to get a life, a lot of people that don't shower. And so naturally, of course, the very first thing you would do when thinking about gamers in that light is create a face cream company. Yeah, he did that.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, you might know this website that I showed 2 months ago in my video, GotOneUp.com. Simplify your skincare. Now, you might be sitting over here, what's a Reddit browsing gamer doing talking about anything regarding skincare?
Now, obviously, that in of itself is not necessarily scammy. There's some argument on whether or not selling a 1.7 ounce bottle for $60 is scammy. But what is a little scammy is the claims made associated associated with that face cream. This fucking cream magically fucking adjusts for any skin tone and condition ever. Like, it has fucking nanobots in it.
We're not trying to make like a misleading, statement in any situation.
It also says in there that it's supposed to boost your skin to help protect you against fucking pollution. The reason why the anti-pollution statement is so absurd is based on all the research I could find, it appears to be a marketing gimmick. In fact, I even found an article from some quasi-famous skincare review person that I'll link down below, and she said about the same thing.
We're not trying to make like a misleading, statement in any situation.
But I think like the most egregious claim is actually in their video advertisement for this product. All organic, my ass. There is no way that this shit is all organic. Fuck you, man. All right, let's take a minute to look at the ingredients, and while we're doing so, we need to remember to totally ignore the fact that many of these ingredients are completely contradictory. Like, for example, having a bunch of acids and fucking alcohol in it, while at the same time having a bunch of skin moisturizer, where it both moistens your skin and dries out your skin at the same time. But let's ignore that bit, because I don't want to dig into the pedantry of it all. Because I don't know, I'm pretty confident that some of the ingredients on this list, you can't just be perusing through the woods and just pluck them off a tree. I mean, shit, even the water that they're using in the very first ingredient listed here is probably consisting of a lot of chemical compounds that they're not actually listing in the ingredients, because technically it's water. And if you're gonna convince me that they traveled through the woods and find a natural fucking spring that they tap to use for this skin cream, unless that's the case, it is chemicalized water that they acquired either from the tap somewhere or from a processing plant.
We're not trying to make like a misleading, statement in any situation.
I mentioned earlier that they were claiming that it had magical fucking nanobots or something, and that it's good for any skin tone and condition, right? Well, how do they know that? Did they have like a whole bunch of people they were testing this fucking cream on to make absolutely sure that what they said wasn't just made up? No.
Do we test on animals? No, we actually end up testing this on the actual founders. When we were making this product, the amount of times we applied this to ourselves to make sure it worked, to make sure that we were actually seeing some benefits, we were the actual testers in this situation.
This motherfucker sat there and said to everybody's face, it was just himself and the people that he started his company with that tested this product at all. They didn't have a large test body or anything, and yet had the balls to sit there and tell you to your face that it's good for any skin type and condition or whatever, which is just insane. That is just a lie. It is just literally a false advertisement. That's what that is.
We're not trying to make like a misleading, statement in any situation.
But one of my favorite claims that I forgot to mention earlier was he claimed it had UV protection. That's interesting. So can you use it as a sunblock? Well, apparently not. According to this fucking guy that wrote a review, he claims he talked to customer service and they said you cannot. So what's the point of having UV protection if it's not a sunblock and you can't use it as a sunblock?
We're not trying to make like a misleading, statement in any situation.
And the reason I'm saying it's a scam, if you couldn't catch it already, is because this company that Mutahar is one of the main founders for is making a bunch of claims that are unsubstantiated and or straight up lies. They're trying to sell you a product under false pretenses, which last time I checked is a scam. But none of that would look as suspicious if it weren't for the fact that Mutahar privated the very video announcing this company in the first place. The video that I showed you a couple clips from of him announcing this company like 3 months ago, it's gone off of his YouTube platform.
We're not trying to make like a misleading, statement in any situation.
Anyway, real quick, if you like this video, be sure to like, share, subscribe, and all that jazz. And I'd also like to say thank you to my Subscribe Star members for supporting me throughout all this shit and buying me the booze that I need to suffer through all the shit that I had to suffer through to make videos like this. And by suffer, by the way, I mean having to suffer through Mutahar content because he is a fucking insufferable tard. Anyway, thanks for watching.